Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way to 2024 and review them. And this one is the big one. It's the biggest one we've done in a while. It is The Deadly Assassin. I love this episode. I'm probably gonna spend like a half an hour on this review. I don't even know how long it's gonna go yet, but here we go. Just first of all, let's get down to the basics. This episode was hated when it came out for several reasons, which we will get to. But first of all, this episode picks up immediately where the previous one left off, with the Doctor leaving Sarah Jane behind in what he believes is South Croydon, but actually isn't. But then he goes back to Gallifrey because he received a call or whatever. Now, of course, you assume from the way the previous episode ended, the Time Lords need him. They request his presence on Gallifrey to deal with something. No. But even before that, the opening crawl, essentially, this is still, remember, this is about 6 months-ish before Star Wars came out, before the first Star Wars movie ever came out with the opening crawl. Of course, an opening crawl is nothing new for Hollywood. I mean, it's a fairy tale thing. That's why George Lucas did it in the first place. But I do find it kind of interesting that a Doctor Who episode still did it first. Kind of. But yeah, I love the opening crawl. And unlike the Star Wars opening crawls, the Doctor actually reads the opening crawl aloud, and you don't have to get as close to the screen as possible and frantically read everything you see before realizing what it even means. Like I do. I'm a slow reader, so I appreciate the Doctor doing me a favor and actually reading what is happening. But yeah, so it's an interesting, eerie setup for what this episode is going to be, and then you get bombarded with like the loreness stuff of just the Doctor seeing the Panopticon and all the different Time Lords walking around being pushed aside by something, and the President gets assassinated, and the Doctor sees all of that. He's receiving a premonition from the future. It's like, what the hell is this episode? Where is this even going? And of course, the Doctor then lands in Gallifrey, and we get to properly see Gallifrey for the first time. Yes, we kind of did see a version of Gallifrey back in the War Games during the Doctor's trial. We kind of saw sections of Gallifrey throughout the Third Doctor's era with the CIA stuff. And by the way, they're getting the first mention by name in this episode, so that's interesting. But this is our first proper look at Gallifrey, or at least the redesign of Gallifrey that became the idea, the concept of what Gallifrey is. And still is for a lot of people. It looks amazing. The look of the guards. I like that they have these little wrist communicator things. I love the way that works. And I love the helmet. I love the design of the weapons, the stasers, the design of the Castellan's office, the idea of the Castellan to begin with. Like the Time Lord outfits, the Time Lord fancy schmancy gowns for the pomp and circumstances ceremonies, the way the President himself looks with the rod of Rassilon and the sash of Rassilon, and just all this lore exposition dump. I love it. I just love anything to do with Gallifrey and Gallifrey's rich history and rich lore. I mean, there's a long-running Big Finish series just about Gallifrey and the Gallifreyan politics. It goes through all the different phases, like from pretty much since Romana became president, all the way through the Time Lord Civil War, and there's this Time Lord diaspora, and then the Daleks came, and then there's some leadership changes, and then the Time War happens, and just there's just so much to explore with this planet, and it all stemmed from this one episode. Like I said, we saw bits and pieces of Gallifrey up until this point, but this episode really establishes the lore of Gallifrey, the Time Lord chapters, the Academy, the Panopticon, the President, the Presidency, the how the President chooses his successor, counselors, cardinals, all of it. It came from this episode, and I love it. Robert Holmes took us on a journey. Robert Holmes, I would argue, is the true creator of Gallifrey. Like, Verity Lambert and Sidney Newman are the creators of Doctor Who. Terry Nation is the creator of the Daleks. Robert Holmes is the creator of Gallifrey. I mean, his episode that he wrote, The Time Warrior, was the first episode to mention the name Gallifrey. And yes, we have seen bits and pieces of Gallifrey from other writers, but for the most part, it all stemmed from his idea. Some might even argue he's the George Lucas of Doctor Who, or the Gene Roddenberry of Doctor Who. I probably wouldn't go that far, but yeah, he's the Gene Roddenberry of Gallifrey, I would say. Now, this is where we kind of get into the controversy, because as I mentioned, this of course is the true look of Gallifrey, and it kind of clashes with what we've seen of Gallifrey before up to this point. That got a lot of people angry. The people did not like this episode at first because it completely shatters their entire worldview of what they thought Gallifrey was and Gallifrey looked like, and it changed their perception on the Time Lord. I mean, case in point, the president gets assassinated. They're all in complete disarray. There's chaos in Gallifrey. It made the Time Lords appear vulnerable. These near omnipotent, godlike beings who are featured in the war games, who actually managed to erase the warlords from history and time lock their entire planet, they can be killed just as easily as that. And they're no strangers to politics and conspiracies and all that. And I felt like it kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I loved it. I absolutely adore it. I don't know what people's problem is, but for a time, this was a very hated episode. But now it's one of the most beloved episodes of all time. It's considered one of the greatest episodes in the show of all time. Kind of makes you wonder what people will say about the Timeless Child storyline in a few years to come. But I suppose only time will tell, because that also changed a lot of the already established lore of Gallifrey, but also the established lore of the Doctor. So it's understandable. Anywho, so I just love the way the Doctor navigates the situation, being really clever. It's like getting inside the elevator, setting it down, and then moving away and hiding behind a column, waiting for the other Time Lord guards, the Chancellery guards, to show up and think he's using the elevator, and they go through all the floors, not realizing that the Doctor was actually behind the column and just going the other way. And the Doctor does that several times in this episode, and I think that's really great. It really shows the strategy and the connivingness. I think I just invented a word now. The connivingness of the Doctor, and especially the Fourth Doctor. So I really like that. And while some people scoff at the idea of politics and over-explaining things and just talking around and talking and pomp and circumstances, one of the main reasons why the prequels are as hated as they are. Either way, I just love it. I mean, I always say that the Gallifrey series on Big Finish is like, imagine if the politics and the Star Wars prequels were interesting, were well written, but set on Gallifrey. At least that's how it felt like in the early episodes of that series. And this is no exception. I like all the extra exposition dumps and the talking around and explaining things and explaining how things work. And I love the introduction of the fact that there are these Time Lord chapters. So essentially, in layman's terms, it's basically like Hogwarts, where Time Lords are being sorted into different chapters. There's 6 of them. There's the Patraxi, the Archelians, the Prydonians, the Ceruleans, the Scandalous, and one more that I'm forget. The Dromians, I believe. So yeah, they're all color coded. We only get to see 3 of them. Kind of. We only see 3. We only have 3 of them mentioned: the Patraxi, the Prydonians, and the Archelians. And we learned that the Doctor is part of the Prydonian chapter, the chapter that has produced more presidents than any other chapter. Hint, hint! That is called foreshadowing, people. We also learned that this other Time Lord Chancellor, Goth, played by Bernard Horsfell, who's already appeared several times in Doctor Who, but primarily as relevance to this episode, he also played the Time Lord that sentenced the Doctor to exile in the first place. And that was later confirmed by other Doctor Who executives that yes, they are the same guy. It's the same Time Lord. So the Time Lord that sentenced the Doctor to Earth is the same one that is the chancellor in this episode and was like the president's right hand man and was supposed to have been the president's successor. And well, we all know where that led, but we're not quite there yet because we have to talk about the cliffhanger of episode one. The doctor spots the shooter, the assassin, runs over to try and get him, and then picks up a stager, and what we believe is he's shooting the president. The doctor kills the president. Or does he? Because when the next episode begins, and I love it. It's a blink and you'll miss it shot, but it's a repeat of the ending of the previous episode. The president walks down the ceremonial aisle and whatnot. He raises the staff. You see the doctor with the stager shooting, and you see someone drawing out a stager seconds before the president gets shot, and you see the stager is jammed, and that's why the president dies eventually. And then, of course, later you learn there's this very brief trial. I like the way the trial runs, and they bring in all the associated people, and I love how the doctor defends himself. And the doctor explains that he wasn't trying to shoot the president. He was aiming for the assassin. He was aiming for the shooter who was in the crowd. He wasn't on the balcony like we thought in the previous episode we saw in the doctor's premonition. No, he was actually part of the crowd, and he shot the president from there. So this is like a murder mystery political conspiracy on Gallifrey, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And of course, we do see this mysterious cloaked figure. We don't know exactly who it is yet. We get references of like someone referring to that cloaked figure as Master. But it's only until we see the body of the camera technician that we realize that it is really the Master, the true Master. And even the doctor realizes it and starts to, and you can literally see the cogs in his mind really starting to work as he puts this whole conspiracy together. And first of all, let me just say, so there's a crime scene where the president was shot, and they used that chalk thing to sort of mark where he fell. I thought that was kind of funny. It's like, oh yeah, the Time Lords treat crime scenes the same way that we do, apparently. I thought that was kind of funny. And I love that they just drew around the extravagant clothes that he was wearing. Priceless. The doctor somehow manages to clear his name from this conspiracy by showing it to the Castellan and the leader of the Chancellery Guards. And then the camera guy gets taken out through a very brutal way. So it's like walking with this spear launched in his back. Like, the direction that this episode continues to go is staggering. It's mind-boggling, and I love it. Like I said, I really like it. And then the doctor realizes that the only way for him to truly clear his name and prove who is really behind this is entering into the Matrix itself. First of all, the Matrix gets introduced in this episode, I believe, and that is where you learn that Matrix is basically the repository of all Time Lord knowledge, dead or alive, or the minds of all deceased Time Lords is being uploaded into the Matrix, into this expansive metaphysical universe, almost, where anything is possible. And the Doctor decides to deep dive into it for the first, and certainly not the last time, as we know. But yeah, so the Doctor wanders around, and then there's like it takes over like 3 episodes where the Doctor is just casually wandering through the Matrix, and the Master and the Master's assistant tries to destroy him inside the Matrix, even sending one of the guards to try and disconnect the Doctor from the outside, of course being stopped by the Castellan. But I just love the scene to take place in the Matrix. It's really just the idea that anything can happen. There's so many different ways to die, and just the limits of your imagination matter no more. Like, anything could be in the Matrix. We see that hill with the eyes, and like the changing of the scenery, and it just becomes a literal hunt at some point. The Doctor gets his foot caught in the train tracks, and the train tries to run him down. The Doctor tries to deny the existence of his wounds, but because the Master's in control, the wounds still persist. And it's like he's feeling actual wounds without physically being injured. And just this I think this whole idea of the Matrix is just crazy, and I love it. I wish we got to see more episodes taking place in the Matrix. Thankfully, we got enough of them in the classic series and one in the modern series. But I think this episode adds so much to the Doctor Who lore, so much to the lore of Gallifrey, in much the same way that Genesis of the Daleks did before it. Another Robert Holmes one, I believe. No, that was Terry Nation. Sorry, that was Terry Nation. But yeah, so anytime you get to go back into a planet you've known about for a while and deep dive into the lore and explore it and expand upon it, I love it. Give me that all day long. And then after the Doctor tries to wound his assailant a couple of times, I love the mind games between him and the assassin who's after him, and then you get to realize that, oh yeah, it was actually Goth the whole time. I think it was kind of obvious. You can kind of tell. It could have been a couple of different people. It could have been Barusa. It could have been one of the people from the crowds. It could have been the leader of the Chancellery Guard who was following the Doctor several times throughout the episode. But I think it was kind of obvious that it was Goth the whole time. It was to be expected, and later, of course, we learned why he did it is because he knew that the president didn't have his name written down as his successor, and he wanted that position so badly that he was willing to kill the president for it, and he made a deal with the Master. Of course, the Master had him under mind control. We now learn that the Master is so powerful with his hypnosis, he can literally hypnotize fellow Time Lords. That's insane if he can do that. But then there's the fight scene between the Doctor and Goth. Goth literally gets ignited on fire for making the stupid mistake of firing a firearm inside a marsh swamp and igniting all the marsh gas. But then after that, like, the Doctor and Goth really go at it in the water, and Goth strangles the Doctor underwater, and that's how one of the episode ends. And that's the cliffhanger. That caused a lot of problems in the real world because of the quote-unquote excessive violence in Doctor Who that was happening at that time. I can't remember the name of the woman that saw it, and I think Mary Whitehouse or something with White in the name. She didn't like that, and that was really the spark that led the long fuse that led to a very long list of, shall we say, things that eventually led to the Doctor Who's cancellation in '89. That was the first spark that lit the fuse. This then, of course, followed a long and enduring process against Doctor Who by this woman and by Michael Grade and by other people who essentially made it their life's mission to end Doctor Who. Still took them a couple of years, but they got it in the end, and that is the unfortunate part. But it all stems from this, like the usage of blood and a man burning alive. The Doctor is being drowned alive, and that's the cliffhanger. There's a lot of violence in this episode. Still very, very tame compared to what we get in Doctor Who in the modern series, and let's not even talk about Torchwood just yet. But yeah, still very, very tame compared to what we're now used to with Doctor Who at this point. This is really the beginning of it. This was kind of the beginning of it, and of course, we as Doctor Who fans know that, like, the Matrix kind of doesn't exist. It's a theoretical world, but we know that if the Doctor's consciousness dies in the Matrix, the Doctor dies in the outside world. So we're led to that's why we have this sympathy for the Doctor when he is drowning or allegedly drowning. But of course, it's the Doctor. He always finds a way out of these situations. He manages to get out of the Matrix eventually, and he actually manages to defeat Goth. And Goth himself gets himself burned out from the Matrix. He gets the full blast of it, and the Doctor just goes around and leaves him for dead. Eventually, the Master gets caught, or so we think. And when we believe that he was scheduled for termination, or I think liquidation. I can't remember what the exact obliteration. I can't remember the exact term that they used. But after that, we see the Doctor having this long conversation with Coordinator Engen, where he explains, like, all the different intricacies of the Sash of Rastalon and the Key of Rastalon, the Eye of Harmony. Of course, we kind of already know what the Eye of Harmony is because of Omega, because of the Three Doctors. We got to see it in Three Doctors, but this is more putting a fine point on Time Lord history and explaining exactly who Rastalon is and why he's so important, why he's such a major figure in Time Lord society, in Time Lord lore. But of course, the Doctor uses it to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and realize what the Master's whole plan is. He wants to open the Eye of Harmony, destroy all of Gallifrey just to save himself, because he's worn out all of his regenerations. That's why he's in this skeletal and decayed state. He's worn out all of his regenerations. He's got no regenerations left. But I mean, he's still the Master. He refuses to die. He refuses to accept his fate. He will always continue to go on, and that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to obtain a new regeneration cycle, destroying all of Gallifrey in the process. And of course, the Doctor has to stop him, which eventually he does, and the Master gets thrown down the shaft, the abyss, all the way down the center of Gallifrey. Of course, we now know that the Master eventually comes out of it, replaced by a completely different actor, and he also, looks a lot better because the makeup looks good. Some people kind of took it as because of his long exposure to the Eye of Harmony, he was able to partially heal himself, but not, fully. So that's an interesting theory. But yeah, so the Doctor saves Gallifrey. Hooray! What is his reward? Get the hell out of here and don't come back. Yeah, love that. That's basically the Doctor's relationship with Gallifrey in a nutshell. The Doctor saves the universe. Thank you. Now get the hell out. So yeah, and I like that we get hints that Barusa was actually the Doctor's tutor in the Academy. It's more expanded upon in other episodes where Barusa shows up, but it's a nice first introduction of this character, considering what we already know happens with this character. If you've already seen all of Classic Who, if you're seeing it for the first time, you don't know who this guy is, but you think you can trust him. You also think you can trust him in his next appearance. Good luck with that idea. But yeah, so like I said, the Doctor saves Gallifrey, and his reward is banishment again, and don't ever come back until the next time the writers decide to take the story to Gallifrey. And then we get hints that the Master's TARDIS was now reshaped into a grandfather clock. Weirdly, that it happened on Gallifrey, that it changed into a human concept. But I mean, it is a clock, so it is still time related, I suppose. Sadly, we're not going to see the Master for a couple of seasons now. And when he does show up again, not only he's with a new actor, but also the clock itself, the entire clock, changes. Well, or rather, it remains. It's a different clock. They keep the image of the grandfather clock as the Master's TARDIS, but of course that is a story for another day. Either way, like I said, I love this episode. I wish we got to see more episodes taking place on Gallifrey. Every episode that took place on Gallifrey wasn't an instant favorite for me, but some of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who are the ones that take place on Gallifrey. Like this episode, obviously. I love the War Games, even though it's only just the last episode that really brings us to Gallifrey. I love the Three Doctors, where we get to see some parts of Gallifrey. I love the Invasion of Time. I absolutely love it. I love the Five Doctors, which takes place almost entirely on Gallifrey. I even appreciate some of the Trial of a Time Lord season, even though it's not technically on Gallifrey. What else? I love the End of Time, and I love, of course, the Day of the Doctor. I wanted to love Hellbent. I wanted to love it so much. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Love Heaven Sent though. But yeah, I even am a timeless child apologist. I like some of the episode that takes place on Gallifrey in the Timeless Children. But that's just me. I know I might be alone on this, but who cares? It's my show, and I can say what I want. So yeah, this is my thoughts on the Deadly Assassin. almost made it to a half an hour. Definitely over 20 minutes before editing and stuff. So we'll just have to wait and see how long this review ends up being. But this might be my longest review so far, and haven't even gotten to some of the heavier episodes just yet. So yeah, this is me. This is me talking about the Deadly Assassin and how much I appreciate it. I love this episode, start to finish. This episode is near Doctor Who perfection for me. I could barely find any flaws in it, and that is all she wrote. So thank you for watching. If you have, let me know in the comments below what you think about this episode. And yeah, that's all I got for now. So until the next episode, everybody, always remember, I am the master, and you will obey me. You will obey me and only me. Hi there. Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.